this is John Fisher's stone here in Mendocino, right? And this is John. And you got, where did the stone come from?
Came from Texas. But it took 3 trucks to bring it here because the first truck got all the way to California and turned back and went to Texas. They were afraid to go over the mountains.
Really? So, what? Now, but you say you have gotten stone from quarries, and you've spent a lot of time over there.
We lived 20 years in Italy.
And then you got to know the carver, the quarry people.
The quarry people and the whole marble industry. We had a studio that was essential to the whole area. That we were the only foreign-run studio in the whole area. The rest of the studios are run by Italians and whatnot, but we had.
Wow, and so
like Arts Center there.
Yes, and you said that you were there for how many years?
20.
And this was at what age for you?
I went over there at 35 and came back at 55.
But as a 12-year-old, your parents took you to Europe. Your dad was an architect, right?
He's an archaeologist.
Archaeologist, okay,
right.
Sorry.
And so he had a year sabbatical, and he was on a dig in Syria. And to get there, we drove all the way through Europe, went to the dig, then went through Beirut and Jerusalem back before the 65 war, and then to Naples and up through Rome, Italy, and Florence, saw the David, saw the Moses, saw the Sistine Chapel, then to Paris for 6 months where he was working with the French on the findings from the dig.
And you were going to museums.
And I was going to museums and
absorbing
it all and saying that if a 12-year-old kid can, we were all kids. At one point, and I was a 12-year-old kid, and there was no reason. Michelangelo was about that time when he went into the studios to learn fresco, and later from there transferred to the Medici, and in my kid brain, we're all equal, and I think truly we are, much more so than people give credit. All this talk of talent is, I think, like Edison said, it's 99% sweat and 1%.
And I've been to Edison's winter home, and Edison invented the 20th century. You can tell from his museum. Yeah.
Right. So
he just took naps and invented it.
A lot of people say you're very talented and whatnot. I've just worked at it a long time, and I didn't in school. I didn't bother studying science so much because I knew it wasn't going to apply to what I was doing. Now I was wrong in some ways because there are some aspects of science that have come into my art and math and whatnot.
Geology, probably.
Sure, but I've learned what I learned what I need to do what I want to do, and a lot of stuff I don't bother learning because it just fills my brain with stuff I don't need to concentrate on. I have other work to do.
And let's talk about that, because when you look at this stone, you don't have an idea of what you're going to do. No. You're going to do this over a 2.5 month period.
Right.
And it's going to go from this and the signatures and the little markings that people have made to whatever is hiding in here, and you have no idea what it's going to be.
No.
And but you're
because if you knew what tomorrow was going to be, would you want to wake up? It's like if it was all planned out for you. What is we don't want to know that. The whole wonder of it all is that we can live this mystery of life.
Yeah.
And here it is played out in another way.
Now in this stone, though, it seems like from some of your work, part of the stone remains. And the image comes out of it.
This right here, maybe that up there, this here, some of this down here is the handprint of God, if you will. This is nature in its purest form. And dare I touch it? What responsibility do you take to destroy
what took so long?
Yeah, or whatever, it's like, and so if you do it, you take on the responsibility of replacing it with something better than what your notion of God has done.
Well, let's talk about this process, because it is a 2 to 3 month process. You start in on something. You probably have you start.
You do an abstract. You go through an abstract phase because creation is from chaos into specific. And so you start on the big abstract principles. That's where the math and the science come into it. So, the concept of the golden mean is the DNA spiral of relationships to 1.168, that whole
Pythagorean.
Yeah, all these things are part of our DNA structure of everything. So if I put those abstract concepts into this block and start to take it off at certain ratios here, and because this is the golden mean, and then I go to the golden mean up there, and I do this and that, I start putting into the block a genetic footprint that is essential to our brains and our whole makeup. And then from that, through the process of creation, you have an abstract gesture, and from that gesture you start to see images like you do in clouds or whatever. And because then the ideas are not imposed upon it, but they come from it. And the idea is that if the thoughts that come from you are pretty much petty and superficial, because if I say mother and child, suddenly your brain will latch onto all these little images that you know of mother and children, and that's what you'll begin with. Whereas the mother and child you see in the clouds is the one you recognize. It's a sort of a keyhole look into a private view of the mother and child.
Keyhole look.
You're looking through the keyhole. She doesn't know you're there. It's an intimate moment that you've come upon. That's the mother and child you see in the clouds. Because the gesture of the elbow is like this, or the tilt of the head is like that. You couldn't have thought of that. But you can recognize it when you see
it coming out of the cloud. So that's really great. I really like that just the metaphoric thing, that this solid thing right here is just like that.
Yes.
And that the suggestion.
Right. And so you get to a point where you not just have one possibility, your brain starts coming out with multiple possibilities. Boy, you can have 6 or 8 different ways you can take it, and then you have choices. And you can say, this is petty, this is profound.
Roughly, so that's still in that intuitive phase. It seems like you go through a process here, mentally and visually. Right?
You live your life. And you live your life on a daily level by removing stone, by involving yourself in the process of living, until out of that living comes this miracle, comes this real magical thing that you never could have thought of before.
Well, now, normally you work in a studio setting.
Right.
This stone would go to your place. You would have quiet up there. You'd more or less.
But studios in Italy are full of people.
Okay.
So
you're used to this.
Yeah, and
this is going to stay here the whole time, and it's going to be carved right in this spot right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But what were you saying about in Europe?
In Europe, all throughout Europe, the idea of the symposium is spread, in which a town like Mendocino would get 8 of these blocks and put 8 of them here and invite 8 sculptors to come and put them up in the art center, and all the restaurants would feed them and give them and pay them. But at the end of the period of time, there'd be 8 sculptures
for the community.
And the community then would put one down there on the headlands and one over here in a roundabout and another over there. And so that when people came through here, they suddenly were very wealthy. They had 8 monumental sculptures, and some towns would do this multiple times. They would have 30 monumental sculptures, all through the park and all through the town, and coming into the town and going out of the town. And it was just a way to quickly build up an art reputation for a town without having to spend a fortune.
Yeah. Well, now back to the process. You're in that initial phase, and then things are starting to get a little more specific. Every time you chip something away, it's getting more specific.
At a certain point, you start seeing images, and then you
it
choose
gets focused.
One. You focus in on one. But because you're seeing it, you're seeing it. You know where it is in the stone. You don't have to find it.
You've been
there.
looking at it a long time.
And you've already removed enough stone to reveal it. And so to actually pull it off and finish it off, you have to remove only a fraction of the stone that you've already removed.
So then you're getting into finer work then. Now you were talking about hand sanding things.
Yeah.
You don't use machines at all to sand?
No, not the sand.
And sanding is kind of now the sort of the final.
It's the final
thing.
touch, yeah.
Let's see your hands again.
Pretty
But you use sandpaper too.
Sandpaper, rasps, all scrapers, and all sorts of things.
And in terms of sort of proportion of the time that you
Half is finishing.
Half.
In a marble
Wow.
sculpture, half.
Wow.
It takes is when the sculpture looks finished. When you put your chisels down, you're halfway done. If you're lucky, you can even spend more time on the finish, but it's at least half of the work is still ahead of you.
But marble is structured in such a way that once you're down there, unless you've got some really thin something like a finger or something, it's all going to stay together.
Oh
pretty
yeah,
much.
no.
You're not going to lose
You're not
something.
Going to lose anything. No.
You're going to lose Venus's arm.
No. But you see, in marble and in this, the chisel when it hits will bruise or crush or damage the crystals. That it's where here it's super white, those crystals are actually bruised, whereas these here are broken, and the bruise